The New York criminal case against Donald Trump is probably the only one of the four that he is currently facing that will reach the sentencing stage before the November election. Two of those cases are, of course, federal prosecutions that will likely be shut down by Trump's Justice Department if, it is a big if, Donald Trump is reelected president. And then there's Georgia, a state-level case with prosecutorial independence that the DOJ can't touch and for which Trump cannot pardon himself. Same goes for his New York State conviction. Now, Trump knows all of this quite well, which is why he's doing everything in his power to shield himself from any current or future state-level criminal charges, regardless of whether he wins the election or not. And he is doing it with the help of his own party in Congress, where the Speaker of the House is now considering a bill to give current and former American presidents the option of moving state or local prosecutions into the federal courts instead. Joining me now is Duncan Levin, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Duncan, you are my legal sensei. Please help me understand. I mean, on its face, it would seem like Donald Trump believes he gets at least a better deal in federal courts than state courts, right? Can you talk about the strategy there?
So much for states' rights, right?
Exactly.
This is, by their thinking, the president or the former president is above the law in all 50 sovereign states in the United States of America. And you could think of all of these crimes that are not federal crimes, that don't bear on a federal question or cross state lines or have anything to do with interstate commerce, just a purely state crime. And I'm thinking, for example, shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue.
Sure.
You know, a local murder case, the local DA's office would not be able to prosecute it anymore. And it would have to be removed somehow to federal court for a federal prosecutor, I suppose, to prosecute where there's no statute available. And you could see where this is going, and it's complete bedlam. And not only is this unlikely to pass the Democratic Senate. But it's unconstitutional.
Well, that was my question.
Because the current state of the law is that a state prosecution, a criminal prosecution, can be removed to federal court if the conduct underlying it relates somehow, it comes under color of someone's federal office, and there's some sort of federal defense to it. And you saw this most recently with Mark Meadows.
Yeah.
He tried to remove the election interference case in Georgia to the federal court, saying that this came from his time as chief of staff in the White House, and that got rejected by the federal courts and sent back down to the Georgia state courts. But that's really where this arises. And so I think this really falls more into the category of sort of performative politics than anyone writing this who has any knowledge of criminal law or constitutionality or anything. So
wait, you're saying the House Republican Conference isn't concerned with
shocking, I know,
constitutionality of things? I do wonder, though, when we talk about what levers there are to pull in and around immunity. We're waiting for this big decision from the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
And they very well could confer some limited immunity on Donald Trump for certain activities in and around what he did in office and thereafter. I do wonder whether that immunity question could affect any of the state level prosecutions as well.
Yeah, and the real answer is nobody knows, because nobody knows what the Supreme Court's going to do.
Right.
They've taken a long time to sit on this. They haven't ruled yet. We're expecting a ruling, but we don't know. And Mr. Trump is asking for something very broad. He's asking for immunity from criminal prosecution, not only around the activities carried out as part of the core part of his presidency, but this quote-unquote outer perimeter of activity that somehow relates to his presidency but is further removed from it. And I think the answer is probably that it's unlikely to affect the two state cases, and really just because of the facts here. Remember, this is something that has actually gotten tested in the New York courts, because when Mr. Trump got indicted, he brought the case to federal court. And he went in front of Judge Hellerstein, who's a federal judge. And among other claims that he made this claim about presidential immunity. And Judge Hellerstein said that Mr. Trump had not presented any evidence at all that hiring and paying your own personal attorney relates to your core constitutional duties, that paying hush money to a porn star relates to your core constitutional duties.
Up for debate in a Donald Trump presidency, but
again,
okay.
Shocking. Or that, covering up a conspiracy to promote your election by unlawful means is part of your core constitutional duties. And the biggest insult you could give to a defense attorney is to say that they didn't even come up with a colorable argument.
Right.
So that means you got nothing.
You didn't even try.
You didn't even try. And so it's and the Georgia case arguably has more to do with his duties because it relates to an election. But even that, you're talking about whether it relates to even remotely relates to his constitutional duties in calling an elected official and having them falsify, election results or pretend that they're electors or come up with fake documents being, fake elector documents. And so I don't think any of this relates to the outer perimeters of what he is arguing here. So it's unlikely to carry any water. But with some of these judges and the Supreme Court these days where they're flying flags upside down, you really just don't know what they're going to rule or how they're going to take it up.
And when they are. I do wonder, as we talk about judges, what you imagine the prosecution in the New York case is going to ask for in terms of sentencing for Trump's 34 felony convictions.
Jail time, period. They're going to ask for jail time, and with good reason. And it's not politics. It's because the case calls out for jail time, and I don't think that's a political statement. I think it's because, and you could argue, look, this is somebody who's lived a law-abiding life for a long time. It's a low-level e-felony. It's his first criminal conviction. It's nonviolent. But you could also argue on the other side, and I think this is the way that the prosecution will see it, and likely the judge, that to the extent that the legislature envisioned an e-felony being punishable by up to 4 years in jail, this is the case that screams out for it. This is the case where the falsifying of business records relates to subverting the election to the presidency. Michael Cohen went to prison for 3 years for basically the same conspiracy. And you could say, well, they're different sovereigns. It was a federal prosecution. This is a state prosecution. And Michael Cohen was not a leader of that conspiracy. Donald Trump was the leader of the conspiracy. Michael Cohen was a henchman there. He was somebody who was carrying out orders. And so if there's parity in sentencing, it calls out for a jail term. But also, this is somebody who's been repeatedly violating the gag order,
which hasn't been adjudicated yet.
Well, and also he's violating it even recently. I mean, in that rambling 33-minute speech he gave, he was railing on Michael Cohen. He didn't mention him by name, but he called him a sleazebag. He was on Newsmax the other day calling the jurors, and the judge is very concerned with what Donald Trump is saying about these jurors. He was, talking about the jurors and how he didn't get a fair trial with them. And so Judge Merchan's been really clear with Donald Trump and saying, if you violate this gag order, you're going to jail. And so he's put him on notice about it. And I think when you put all of this together, it's a case that the prosecution is going to ask for jail time. I think there's a really good chance of it.
Okay, Duncan, please come back on July 11th when we have the sentencing, because I am eager to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you, my friend, for your time.
Thank you, Alex.